I'm waking up in the morning. My smartphone is actually figuring out whether I slept well or I didn't sleep well. It will put in a music which can actually get me out of the bed. The temperature would get me onto the shower very, very quickly. The robot will cook the food. The elevator will be up because they know that I'm heading out to my car. The car AC is completely switched on. I go to the office and my lunch appointment has been set altogether by my smartphone.
I am a firm believer that some governance is needed. The question to me is that who should be governing? Who's the regulator? By default, it's assumed that the government of every country or is the regulator, or the media department or some tech department in the government will be the regulator.
And one of the primary problems we have is if we need information about a specific topic, how can we go and trawl about all of these data sources and come out with some information that makes sense and do it in a timely manner.
Take anything, right? It could be a piece of good news, bad news, fake news, whatever it is. It can get amplified so quickly, so fast, it becomes viral, right? So that amplification is something that we shouldn't lose sight of, right?
So somewhere I believe, that sensitizing that moral compass around, as you said, how you behave around AI is something which we need to do. It's an educational thing, and that is something which I believe is very, very challenging. So one of the things, in today's world, a term which is on the tip of everyone's tongue is artificial intelligence. What is it doing? How is it changing our world? And today we have so many good people to talk around about artificial intelligence, like it's overwhelming me. So all of us are aware of ChatGPT, right? And what it's been doing to the entire world. We are concerned that students are using it for almost every possible assignment today. But the kind of excitement that we see on the consumer front, we still are not seeing that on the enterprise end of it. So I'd like to start with you, Rajan. Like, what is your take on this entire ChatGPT and generative AI technology in general? And why don't we see that momentum that is there in the consumer market on the enterprise end of it?
Right. Maybe I'll differ a little bit on that in the sense that there is excitement and interest on the business end as well, largely on account of the fact that the ChatGPT phenomenon has made this household kind of a situation, right, for everybody. Even if you are not using it currently in your business or in your enterprise, right, for driving organizational goals, you are seeing your kids using it, right, for the reasons that you mentioned, for example, right, or in some way or the other, right. So therefore, the democratization has definitely brought a lot more light and attention to the phenomenon of artificial intelligence and Gen AI in particular. In our experience, we are seeing that there are a lot of organizations that are quite excited by the prospects of what can be done, and they are starting to experiment with in some shape and form. What you don't see as momentum is the significantly large initiatives with big dollars being committed, right, that we will build something substantial, right, on the back of Gen AI. But there is definitely a whole lot of interest. I mean, I can give a couple of examples. One of the solutions that we have been pushing into the market, right, which leverages Gen AI capabilities, is the ability to come up with high quality personalized content that targets the customers and the segments that you are interested in, especially for B2B companies, right. It's very hard for them to actually go after everybody that might be there in their prospect list. You will dedicate your sales and business development bandwidth to maybe the top 20% of the prospects, because that is where you see the best possibilities of conversion. So what do you do with the remaining 80%, right? You cannot have a very personalized, targeted approach to them. That's what can change with the power of Gen AI, because you can create very personalized kind of campaigns, mailers, contents using the power of Gen AI that also understands and integrates with who they are and what we know about them, right? So that's what is really coming into practice now. So one of the pilots that we recently started working on, it's a full-blown project in some sense, is that how do you use the power of this creative capabilities that Gen AI brings to the table. The solution that we have is called AI Pen Pal, right? We named it so that it resonates with the content generation part of it, but that is exactly what they're going to be using, right? How do they appeal to this long tail of prospects that they have? So that's one example. I can talk a bit more right as we progress.
Okay, so you gave a very interesting example of content writing and marketing and all these things, and essentially it is all about when you are trying to structure any communication, you require data. You are into investments and investor relations. Do you see having this kind of a technology having an impact on what you do as a as part of your role?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll answer the bit about investments, but then also other use cases on the enterprise bit, right, that we were just talking about. So as an investor, just the ability to go through huge amounts of data on how markets have performed either on the private side or public side, the ability to go through that, I think that has anyway evolved a lot in the last few years. There's been a lot of data optimization solutions. The ability to literally go through mountains and mountains of data has been improving. What AI or Gen AI specifically brings to it is the intelligence or the smartness around it. How do you give a very specific query? The first case, you had a lot of data, you had some insights, and then you pick and choose what works for you. You give shape to the data and the analysis as per your requirements. Now you're as an individual or even as an investor, you're literally asking a very specific question, and you keep on refining and refining and refining that question, and your chat GPT or whichever LLM you're using, it's giving you back a very customized answer. So I definitely think that investors' ability to understand trends, sift through data, as well as then apply that data on possibilities that can happen across sectors is huge.
Okay.
The other aspect as an investor is also that we take great pride in being generalists. So that means that we don't know too much about anything, and this is again where solutions like Gen AI that offers today, that becomes very useful, because you don't need to know everything. It's like having a very, very wide thesaurus or encyclopedia to your aid. Even on the enterprise bit, I'd just like to add to that last bit, like what we are seeing as e-commerce is home to me, right? It's very close to home today. And there's a lot of use that we are seeing in e-commerce in terms of how we get the customer to interact with an app or a website. So while on the outside you see the customer interaction, but in the back end, it's the enterprise or the organization which actually is using Gen AI to come up with better interfaces, better data solutions, better and more optimal answers when a customer comes to a portal and searches for a product. At the same time, there's a lot of developer efficiency that's increasing because of the use in-house on the tech side or within the org.
Okay, so one thing that I can take away from what you said is like, it's in a way for generalists, it's creating a sort of democratization in the accessibility to technology and how they used to interact with it, right?
Right.
So, Harsh, what is your take on this entire thing? Like, how do you see this impacting business operations in general and the managers and who are working with this?
So I can maybe start with a very trite example. So this is December, end of year, financial year time. Also the time where performance reviews happen en masse in most companies. So I have managers now using ChatGPT to give a summary of the employee performance and have them create like a very detailed performance review that is submitted for a formal appraisal cycle. Overall, from a business operations side, I do concur that a lot of the business operations, especially in the enterprise side, they're more on the experimentation stage. I don't think there is a lot of real world use cases which are happening, although there is a lot of interest. For instance, we've been trying to integrate a more intelligent customer support system where customers can actually ask queries about whatever problems they're running into, and the AI engine effectively either gives them some KB articles or gives them a solution to the problem. So the idea is that reduces the human overhead of having a person respond to the query or having a senior engineer respond to the query. So that reduces obviously the business cost for the company for supporting its customers. However, I think most of the solutions in the market, they are in a relatively I won't call it an immature stage, but definitely needs a few more months, perhaps a year or two to get to a stage where they can be rolled out into production. Another interesting use case that we had recently is generating technical documentation or tutorials or guides, etc. So we've come across some solutions which are absolutely smashing, which are ready to roll out like at the drop of a hat, which effectively you can go to a UI, do a few point clicks, etc. and it creates an entire knowledge base article, it creates the entire text, it can convert it to multiple languages, it creates an automatic video of whatever it is that you did with highlighting the screen saying, okay, you're going here, you're clicking there, etc. So it can create a very powerful article out of nothing, literally like a 2-minute screen capture. And those are also some of the use cases which and this is a solution which is mature enough to be able to start getting deployed straight away. So the different solutions out there, there are different stages of maturity, and I do think within the next year or two we are going to see a huge impact overall on the business operations side too.
So what appears to me is like there's a dichotomy between there are certain use cases where the application is like really good right now, it's a matured application, versus there are certain kind of business processes where it still has some ground to cover. Right. So if I have to ask you, like, can you give me like 2 or 3 characteristics, that, okay, if this is there in your business process, AI is going to work. If this is not there, it's not going to work. Maybe I can, have you and like really want to hear you from.
So I think the primary use case in my mind, and that's something which I think will be a smash hit for whoever can nail it, is the ability to make sense of unstructured data from multiple sources. So if you can grab, for instance, in a company now, in any typical company, you'll have 20, 30, 40 different data sources. Some stuff is in Confluence, other stuff is in Slack, in some other messaging platform, Notion, etc., Jira. So there's n number of systems that we're using now. And one of the primary problems we have is if we need information about a specific topic, how can we go and troll about all of these data sources and come out with some information that makes sense and do it in a timely manner. So if somebody who can nail it, whichever vendor, I don't think we've experimented with a few, haven't really found the right solution just yet. But that would be of great value to any business.
Okay.
Yeah, I will look at it from 2 dimensions. One is, of course, the structured data and the unstructured data part, right? On the structured data, there have been methods and algorithms that have been available for quite some time now, right? I mean, if you really understand your database, your schemas, where the information is stored, what are the relationships and so on, there are plenty of really established techniques that allows you to analyze the data and then find the insights from them, right? And that's been there. Consumption of those insights is another story though, right? I mean, you might actually generate really high quality insights, but how do you make it available in the hands of end decision makers? And how do you embed it into their business processes? That's been a challenge, right? That's one area where generative AI and some of the newer techniques can help. On the unstructured front, I completely agree with Harsh, right? In the sense that Gen AI actually gives you a lot more power in playing with unstructured data. Whatever be the type of data that you have, whether it is text, even image and videos, for example, right? You can do a lot more using the power of Gen AI. One particular area where we have been experimenting is to work with this hallucination concept. I'm sure that you would have heard about it, right? And hallucination is actually seen as a bad thing, right? Because you might end up getting answers that are being plucked out of thin air, right? But that is also an area where you can actually put it to good use, right? I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say that there is an organization which has business reviews every fortnight or every month, right? Every fortnight, the leadership is going to put forth a set of queries saying that these are all the things that I would like to discuss and analyze and understand in the review meeting, right? If you have been collecting all of that, not even collecting it, I mean, just look at all the PowerPoints that have been generated for the last 2 years, and you pick all the titles from those PowerPoint slides and you feed that into an LLM and you ask the LLM to generate more similar queries. That's an area where you can put it to good creative use. It's hallucination. It's going to hallucinate what other queries are likely, but it's going to explore a lot more nuances, right? That's one possibility. The other one where we have been doing some work is in the area of market research. Normally, when you conduct market research, you collect a lot of data from people, and then you can actually create cohorts based on different ways of cutting that data, right? Figuring out what segments and so on. But sometimes you want to look at what will a particular persona that doesn't exist, how will they respond, right? And you can actually use the power of Gen AI to create those personas, right? In the sense that let's say that there are 3 different factors, X, Y, and Z. There'll be customers who tick the box on X and Y, but not on Z. Y and Z, but not on X, right? But you're interested in a persona who is actually going to tick the box on X, Y, and Z. how will that persona respond to a particular question? You can actually use the power of some creative hallucination, right? So there are some possibilities there. You need to look at, therefore, what is it that you are analyzing, whether your traditional AI, ML and other data analytic techniques are sufficient, or whether you use the power of Gen AI, right, to really push the frontiers, right, of what is possible.
So in fact, just as you said this, about 2 days ago, Andrej Karpati, who is like one of the technology officers with OpenAI, he said the exact same thing, that there's a very fine line difference between what is hallucination and creativity. In fact, the way I would like to think about it is like, ask any person a question out of their circle of competence and watch them hallucinate. Okay, so Deepak, you are the content guy here, right? So how would you see this impacting all this, because content happens to be one of the primary areas of application.
I'm actually the kind of end consumer user of AI. I would say that. I'll just take the discussion to a different front. My excitement on AI happened at two fronts. On a very recent, on a lighter note, Sam Altman has become a Rajnikant of AI for me. The guy who could fire the board in 4 days is nobody less than a Rajnikant scenario. So, but on a serious front, I think for me, AI is all about running that line of fiction and a science fiction. And what used to be what we would call a fiction is becoming a reality today. I'm waking up in the morning, my smartphone is actually figuring out whether I slept well or I didn't sleep well. It will put in a music which can actually get me out of the bed. The temperature would get me onto the shower very, very quickly. The robot will cook the food. The elevator will be up because they know that I'm heading out to my car. The car AC is completely switched on. I go to the office and, my lunch appointment has been set all together by my smartphones. So I think, and this can just continue all through the day. And I think that is a real excitement of end user as an AI for me too. So I'm really enjoying this conversation because I'm realizing that AI is just not about this data and artificial intelligence. It's much beyond that. Yeah. So happy to hear more, and probably I'll bounce us back that what these things happening on a deepfake side and a lot of those things, is somebody really governing this? Do we really need to govern this, or is there needs to be a right direction? How is that accountability really coming into the picture when we getting into this AI as the end user? And that is where my thought process will actually run on the AI thing.
Very interesting. In fact, I am not a tech guy, but I happen to be a super user. That's how I would describe myself. And this deepfake and voice cloning, in fact, I was using this service called as 11 Labs, and it takes like 40 seconds of your voice to completely replicate and clone. So I believe in like 1 year down the line, I'll be not sure if it's my wife calling me. Because anyone can call and like ask me for an OTP and I'm done for.
It's already happening.
It's already happening. These kind of things are already happening.
In fact, there was a video that came out on, this WhatsApp University, of course, which actually talked exactly about this.
Yeah. And in fact, we recently had Prime Minister Modi talking about, he's playing Garba and this video comes out. So with all these technologies, my inkling as an educator who has been watching this is, maybe there's one like technological part to it, the solution where we have some kind of governing mechanism. But then there are also downsides to it, right? We have already seen what European Union AI Act has done. It's in a way stifling a lot of innovation out there. Many companies are changing and moving to US now, their registration, so that they can innovate on this. The other thing sometimes it strikes me is that, is it time to change social norms of around certain things about deepfakes? Like one of the key issues is like creating some kind of explicit videos using your face and all these things. But when it happens at scale, maybe like it loses that that surprise element and like the social norm is changed. Because right now we think it is true, but at some point our heuristic is going to switch and we have to say, oh, probably it's false. So in some way it's triggering our critical thinking also. But I would really love to hear, Lubna, what would your take be?
This is, I think I find it really amazing how technology and philosophy, they run so close together, right? Because after a point when you say this, right, that there's a video, I don't know whether it's real, whether it's been created by someone. It's literally like saying that my reality is different from your reality, even though we are sitting in the same room, but what you are seeing or how you're perceiving things, how you are internalizing them is very different from how I'm doing it. The question is, does it work at scale? Because even without technology, right, the training or we are trained throughout life to form a common view. We are trained that, oh, this is a box and this is how you see it. That's how we are conditioned. So I don't know at what point it starts to break down. In small settings, yes. It's WhatsApp University, as you just called it, right, is an example. Now when you get a forward on WhatsApp, you don't know whether it's really happened, it's fake, should you believe this video talking about some Ayurveda recipe or not. So it kind of, to me, at least individually, it rather than helping, rather than using the technology to move forward, I actually think it takes us all back, because we lose the benefits of technology. We start doubting everything that the technology is creating for us. At the same time, right, coming to Deepak's point on governance, I am a firm believer that some governance is needed. The question to me is that who should be governing? Who's the regulator? By default, it's assumed that the government of every country or is the regulator, or the media department or some tech department in the government will be the regulator. That's the bit I don't agree with. And if people focus more on who the regulator should be and why it should be an independent body of the right tech specialists and the right industry experts, that would be more useful than wondering whether it should be regulated or not, because we need regulation. I think human beings need it in some shape or form.
No, you're absolutely right, and probably I'll add to this, Lubna, by saying that how much can government regulate? Because at the speed the AI is moving, you can only regulate to a certain extent. Can you create a governance around it, or do you need to regulate this? It's a question. Today the government is talking about regulation, but can regulation really possible in this AI world? Is a question which I'll probably.
Let me add on this, okay? I mean, and I like a couple of the points that came up, right? One is the whole area of ethics and regulation and compliance. I like the point that you made about how technology and philosophy kind of like go hand in hand. Technology amplifies everything, right? That's what we have seen, right? Whether it is the good or bad. I mean, we used to talk about garbage in, garbage out, for example, right? Today, even more so, the power of amplification is phenomenal. We are seeing the power of amplification of social media, for example, right? You take anything, right? It could be a piece of good news, bad news, fake news, whatever it is. It can get amplified so quickly, so fast, it becomes viral, right? So that amplification is something that we shouldn't lose sight of, right? Biological evolution progresses in certain time scales, right? Technological evolution, it's much, much faster, right? And it does have an impact on social mores and customs, morals and values and so on, right? The reason I bring it up is because in whatever age-old times, right, people used to look at, for example, spirituality or religion, right, as helpful in providing a moral compass, right, for humankind, right, in some sense, so that you are actually guiding yourselves, right, using some values that are outside of anything that might be in your immediate sphere of influence, that there are certain ideals that you need to live up to and so on. I think it will become important for us to actually look at some of those principles, right, and bring them back into place again, because it will never be possible for any kind of comprehensive external regulatory framework to take everything into account and say that I will cater to every nuance that might emerge, right, in the technology, in the AI space. What we need are better internal moral compasses. And I also say this because it's one thing around regulation on, say, deepfakes and those kind of things, right? The bigger challenge is how we all behave around AI. AI is like an innocent, immature child in some sense, right? In the presence of human beings, AI is going to more and more understand how we all behave around it, right? If we behave in the right fashion, the AI that we build and develop will be better. If we don't behave well around it, right, then the AI is going to fail as well. I mean, there's a very particular example, right? Some research came out recently on whether people who drive red cars, right, are inherently a bit more rash in their driving, right? You now have all those Waymos and other driverless vehicles that are floating around, right? and they are all observing data. If it is indeed true that red cars change lanes and cut lines more often and violate traffic signals and are rash, then that is the data that's being captured. So whenever the driverless vehicle sees a red car on the road, it is going to behave in a certain fashion, right? Either give it a white berth or whatever, right? Do something so that it takes cognizance of the knowledge and information that it has about red cars, right? So it becomes super important that humans behave in the right way, right? And that can never be regulated externally. We all need better moral compasses.
Okay, so I believe like if we do not behave, it is going to make us behave at some point of time. The point that you raised here, that somewhere, it connects to human values per se. And if I have to connect it to your point about, how do you ground it, and which is a major issue. One of the approaches right now being talked about is alignment, what we call as alignment between human values and like what AI systems do or should do according to human commands. It is in a way grounding the system in particular set of values. The more important question which I feel is like, what is that exact set of values that we are talking about? Because my values, as you said, will be different than yours, right? It can happen within an organization, it can have, happen at society in general. So, Harsh, what would be your take on this entire issue?
So the exact same thought was going through my head, and what I was thinking is looking at the same situation from the perspective of Gen Z or the younger generation. And I was just going through some research which states that the way that the younger generation, and increasingly more so the teenagers, etc., the way they absorb information has changed dramatically. They're absorbing it in small bite chunks, so much so that the structure of the brain and the shape of the brain itself is changing, right? So the brains are effectively being rewired. And going back to Deepak's point about the AI is generating or controlling the music the way I like it. AI is controlling the lighting the way I like it. So basically everything is customized as per my liking. Maybe 10 years down the line, AI will be dictating what you like. Like for these youngsters, as they evolve and they have lived the largest part of their lives in an environment where they have active exposure to AI, social media, whatever. So it is possible that their not just lifestyle, but also their idea of ethics changes completely, right? So whatever is offensive for us as a deepfake video may or may not be offensive for them. It may be something that they're used to, and they are able to automatically have some sort of an alignment around whether or not this is something I should react to, not react to, etc. So, and I do think that change will happen socially over the next 10 years or so.
Okay. So somewhere I believe that sensitizing that moral compass around as you said, how you behave around AI is something which we need to do. It's an educational thing, and that is something which I believe is very challenging, specifically because most of the time education is catching up to technological breakthroughs, right? In fact, what we had seen, like all these AI became mainstream only in 2021 when people started really connecting to it. But what has also happened, it has moved out from those labs within Stanford and Harvard and Wharton, and there has been a complete sort of a capture of these large corporations who are doing most of the innovation. That brings to another thing, like just 2 hours back, Ola launched its own, LLM model, which they are saying is a frontier model, completely built from the ground up in India. Where do you see India in this entire, AI race and AI value chain?
Right. I'll answer this question, but I did want to touch upon a little bit on the previous one as well, right? I mean, we all know Isaac Asimov's foundational rules of robotics, right? I think we need something along those lines, right? I mean, not that these are handed down like 10 commandments or something, right? And then everybody has to go by that, right? Because at the end of the day, we all need to understand our philosophy of life and so on. What is heartening to see is the emergence of a lot more focus and attention, not just among the schools, but also among the current generation of picking up liberal arts, philosophy, economics, humanities as subjects, because that's what we need, right? I know that, I come from a very hard quantitative background. I went to BITS Pilani and XLRI, both were very super hardcore quantitative stuff. So there is a certain kind of an orientation that I have, but I think it is very important to be a lot more grounded. So just in response to the previous question, I think it's also about educational academic institutions and everybody, right, coming together to actually get deeper into those topics, so that we are able to foster a generation of thinkers who understand about these things, right. Now, going to the other question that you had, right, in terms of how India will fare in the coming decades, I see phenomenal possibilities, right. I think that's fantastic news, right, what Ola has done. A few days back, Girish Mathrubootham had talked about how he is ready to take on Sam Altman's challenge, right, of building something in India, right, which can rival OpenAI. I mean, it's one thing, right, to actually do it, right. I mean, we will have to get it done, but before you can do it, you need to dream it, right. We need enough people who have the passion, the excitement, courage, and belief to say that is possible. We can make it happen here, right. Now, one thing that clearly tells me that the intellectual horsepower is there, we see it all around us. Look at the top tech companies. I mean, we happen to work with a lot of tech companies in the Bay Area and in Silicon Valley and other places. So many people, right, of Indian origin who have the intellectual horsepower, right, the brain power to get things done. It's another matter, right. I mean, people keep saying that we are having more of a services mindset and not a product mindset and so on. That will all change in the next couple of decades, right. It will probably accelerate at an exponential pace in terms of people's ability to conceptualize interesting products and solutions. We will also have the benefit of the demographic dividend, in the sense not just demographic dividend in terms of people who are able to do the work, but as an economy that will consume all of these products and services, and we will need very nuanced products and services that cater to the Indian audience, that caters to the Indian customer segment, right? Whether it is in the area of education or agriculture or healthcare or whatever it is, right? We will need those capabilities. I mean, I have come across very interesting startups which are using a combination of drones and imaging and video analytics and technology to help on the agricultural front, right? For example, pesticide and crop selection, right, and all of that stuff. I think it's just starting, right? I mean, I am super optimistic about how this will pan out for India.
Okay, so two things, which I would really like to ask all of you is, how do you see the role of education institutions like ours in, really giving momentum to what you said? Secondly, what would you expect in students today to know about this, considering that 10 years down the line, we are going to live in a very, very different world altogether? So maybe Lubna, I can start with you.
Sure, and in fact, I've been wanting to talk on this topic, right? How does what role does education play, and then providers or delivery people for education, what is the role that education plays in everything? And I feel that all of the things that we talked about, be it philosophy, morals, governance, how we are grounding things, everywhere I believe that if GenAI can actually transform the way people are educated, then a lot of the issues that we are talking about with GenAI, like deepfake videos coming out, or other negative uses of any technology, not just GenAI, those can be taken care of. What is the way to use GenAI now in education institutions is the second part of it, that how do you actually get it in? I think with GenAI, the way, most of the times we all end up hearing that, oh, GenAI is going to take away jobs, because all of the easier jobs, the data crunching jobs, the analytical jobs might go away. When they go away, I think it creates more opportunities. While in the short term, it looks like a job has gone away. What it does is, if there is the right educational element that is created, those same people who are now not doing a low efficiency job today, they should ideally be using some educational institution. It doesn't need to be an XLRI necessarily, but it could be a small course which helps them to come up to speed on some other skill very fast. So this is where I think this vocational education using GenAI is what needs to happen, and it needs to happen not necessarily as full-fledged courses. It could be a 3-month course, and they need to be affordable, so that more and more people, at least in countries like India, where you have a large population and a lot of the jobs. In Deepak's example, someone who was calling the elevator for him is not needed anymore. Someone who was setting the table for him is not needed anymore. And we can keep going up the ranks in terms of, you don't need a secretary in the office, you don't need an executive assistant, and so on. What do those people do? It's a delivery of short form vocational content in a low cost form that could really change the outcome for everyone.
Harsh, I would like to ask you two things. Like, So generally hirings take place, one kind of hire is this fresh out of college guy or girl joining the organization. And then there is someone with, 5-7 years of experience, deep functional expertise. In both of these, what are the skill sets that you would require if they have to work in this entire, new AI world right now?
I think the answer can be dramatically different now and maybe 5 or 10 years from now. So right now, if you ask me, the preference is strongly towards functional expertise and somebody who can be groomed to take on leadership roles further on or shortly in their careers. But yeah, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, our hiring criteria are going to be way more flexible. And I mean, even now when I'm doing any sort of recruitment or any sort of shortlisting, I hardly ever go through the educational institution, the pedigree, whatever. Like, you're interviewing with us, you clear the technical test, you clear the behavioral test, you're through. Which again, as an ideology or as a practice, may be different from what other companies are doing or most other companies are doing, but that is not something which I ever pay any attention to. I always focus on somebody who can get the job done rather than the background they're coming from. And going back to the previous question, completely wholeheartedly second that. We need more vocational content, which is hopefully fostered by Gen AI, but also we need the entire mindset around the educational institutions to change completely, right? For instance, if the new breed of youngsters coming in, if they want to study, a couple of months, they want to do one vocational course, they want to do something else. And so their education is not necessarily linear in nature. So at the end of the day, they should be able to go to an educational institute and say, hey, by the way, over the past 4 years, I've done these kinds of courses. What is the kind of degree that you can, that I can get from you, right? So right now, all that determination happens because of competitive exams, like upfront. Ideally, it should be a more evolutionary approach where we say, okay, this is what you've done, and if you do another, couple of courses over the next year or so, we should be able to grant you a degree like this, right? So that is customized to whatever it is are their interests and their strengths.
Right.
Otherwise, effectively, we end up in a situation where the students may not have chosen wisely, or they may end up in a situation where you say, okay, I've done this, but I don't necessarily like it, or I don't want to do this anymore, so let me go and do another degree. So that mindset has to change completely, and it will require a lot more fundamental changes. Obviously, there has to be more standardization across whatever are these courses which are coming up to say, okay, course done by one institute is acceptable by another institute and so on. So it is more of an ecosystem change, but I do think that's something that at least we need to start thinking about it.
Rajan, if you come to XLRI, what would you look for in a candidate?
Right. Maybe I'll just touch a little bit on some of the other points as well before I answer this question. I think there are 3 things that'll be important, right, in how this thing evolves. I'm reminded of this scene from the movie The Matrix. You might have seen it, where Trinity has to fly a helicopter, right, and she doesn't know how, right, and then she just able to download the program. And then she knows instantly how to fly the helicopter, right? I mention this because in the future, people will want that kind of capability, that I get to learn what I want to know, when I want to know, how I want to know, and where I want to know, right? Learn it, right? And it has to be that kind of flexibility that we create, right? Because then it means that I get to learn something when I know that I can really put it to use immediately, right? And I need it at that point in time, right? Because whenever any organization, whether it is an academic institution or a company, right, we are evaluating what is the effectiveness of L&D programs and interventions. That is always the biggest issue, right? People learn a lot of these things, but what is the real use of all of it, right? But imagine a scenario where you are actually putting it to use, right, instantaneously, and you are being measured on that. I think that is one concept that I wanted to introduce, right? I mean, as in, like, I know that we all know this, but I just want to illustrate it in that fashion. The second is that you will need a bit of a T model going forward, right? This kind of like answers the question that you asked just now, right? People need to be good at many things at a certain broad level, right? But they need to go really deep into one area, right? And that one area will probably define them, right, moving forward. and they pick those areas based on what are the opportunities for evolution in that area itself, right? It could be a domain, it could be a technology, it could be some engineering, it could be something or the other, right? But you still need to know how to be resourceful. You need to have intellectual curiosity. You need to have good problem solving skills. You need to have good communication and collaboration skills. So those are all the part of the horizontal arm of the T, and you need to go in depth in one place, right? And that one area that you go in depth, that is what will define you, right? And you got to pick and choose that very well, right? So that's the second thing that I wanted to say. The third thing is that evolution progresses through encapsulation, right? We have seen that in biological evolution, right? For example, I don't know, like if you do a poll, not too many people might know exactly how mitochondria work in our cell, right, in our cells. But without mitochondria, we can't function, because that is the energy powerhouse of every cell, right, of the organism. But mitochondria itself, right, were actually not a part of early organisms. They were actually captured by some of the early precursors of cells, and then they were made to symbiotically work with these cells in order to create the energy and make it the energy powerhouse of the cell, right? That is in vogue in the technological evolution also, right? Today, a lot of the people who do data science, for example, they don't need to really go into assembly language or even C for that matter, right? So much of stuff can be done using Python and simple, and today you have low code, no code platforms, right? Where you don't even need to know, right? Many of those things, but you can still create really effective output. That encapsulation will also continue to drive progress going forward. So every time there is a new technology, there will be a new baseline that is created. People will need to learn that baseline, and then they have to figure out how to innovate further on top of that, right? So it's a combination of these three things which I believe will drive. In the context of all of this, right, what it will mean is that the flexibility that is available from educational institutions has to dramatically change. I mean, we talked about how people must be able to pick a degree. I mean, they don't pick a degree and then they go into it, but instead they do courses that they want to do, and then they get a degree, right, which is kind of like related to that. One can even question the concept of a degree itself, right, in the coming future. One can even say that the flexibility should be extending across multiple branches. Why can't I, for example, do some courses in biology and medical sciences along with engineering and some humanities for me to be an effective human being in the context of AI, right? Today, there are too many rigid boundaries. I think we need to be prepared to break some of these down, okay? That would be my thinking.
Lubna.
Yeah, actually, I was going to make very similar points that there's no room to explore in the current education system. Like we go in on day one saying that, oh, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a chemical engineer without even knowing what is chemical engineering versus some other engineering. So that room to explore during your years in college, that needs to also continue through the life, which is where these short courses, or as you were also saying, right, today I need to know this, so I'm going to have some access or some form of access to that information, learn it, and then apply it in my job in the next 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. So that ability, the flexibility of being able to increase your knowledge, learn new things at the go, is going to make everything so easy to be applied across the board, rather than having these rigid boundaries, as you said, right? And saying that, oh, I only do this. That said, I do want to make sure that a doctor who's going to be operating on me really knows his stuff well and is not really asking Gen AI in between on what is the next cut to make. So there are always going to be specialized areas where you want people with a lot of depth. So that T model, I think, perfectly describes what we need the education system to start focusing on.
So, in fact, because you mentioned doctors, I read a recent study. So what they did was they created 2 groups. So one group, these groups consisted of doctors who were orthopedics, and what they did was, in one group they showed the AI's recommendation. So the AI basically did a diagnostic of the X-rays and told that this is the kind of fracture and this is how you should probably approach in operating on it. In the other group, the doctor had to do a diagnosis first, and then he or she was shown the diagnosis of an AI. What they found was that in cases where the AI's diagnosis was shown first, doctors tend to have a higher confirmation bias. So the implication possibly is that when you have these tumor board meetings and the board of the doctors who meet together to discuss cases, you should not show AI recommendations first, because that is likely to bias them. They have a higher agreement with AI. Now again, it in a way boils down to this entire social process of how we make decisions, just because the technology has changed in some manner.
Right.
I'll give an example on a very, very same front and probably relate to what you also said. You know, we've become a kind of a adopter of technology, especially in the AI front. And I was reading somewhere that, you know, there's a technology that's been developed where it's just a health meter. And you put this health meter in your washroom or in a bathroom, which will figure out that do you have any kind of an ailment. And thereafter, you can actually take a treatment, or you could probably get your food accordingly and so on, which I think is fabulous. But coming to your question, it has to be adopted, or it has to be evolved in the Indian or Bharat structure. You know, we cannot adopt these policies or these technologies rather, till it is Indianized, or it's built for India. You cannot have a vehicle being parked because, you know, there would be somebody else who's parked the vehicle in that regular spot, so the car will not park itself on its own. So you need to build the technology as the Indian perspective. So some amazing things that can be done if it is more Indianized on that thing. I think that is a great stuff. And of course, the ethics point that you brought up, Lubna, and from the educational perspective, that's where you need to focus on while you're building up on the future leadership. I think these are the two areas where you really need to make sure that yes, the future leaders are really talking and thinking about ethics. They're really thinking about how do we Indianize the technology and so on. So yes, the future looks extremely bright on this.
Okay. So, you know, for me, the takeaway is, in many ways, we have been seeing this gradual shift towards skill-based education rather than, you know, degree-based education. In fact, many times I used to joke around with my students that, you know, if AI comes, I don't know what I'm going to do. Secondly, probably my role would be to give you a sense of purpose, like why do you want to really work with AI? And the other thing which is, you know, coming out is that it is just a regulatory framework in some sense. You know, that official designation that degree matters is what's, you know, we're keeping it up. If, you know, employers like you decide one day that, you know, we are going to look at skills, there is going to be a crisis for a lot of students who are not prepared. So with that, you know, thank you so much, and really such an enlightening conversation. Rarely do I get the opportunity to, you know, speak to people from the corporate at such length and at such depth, and I believe our students would really enjoy this. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Shiva.
Thank you.